And the microphone and the speaker is on your computer as well, because I've switched it off. Yeah.
Accurate. Yeah.
Yep. But you'll have to take care of the. There you go. Perfect. Chat. Hey, everybody, can everybody hear me at the back?
Yes. Yeah.
And people can hear me on Zoom?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. That's a good start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a journey. And you'll see a little bit about the background, why I'm going to walk you through a journey. When I share my background, you'll see that, of course, this is the company I work at, which is Netscope. Netscope is a cybersecurity company with network security and data security products, and it is full stack. I'll show you that. The focus of our discussion today is going to be around data security in general. And then we'll jump into the why, how, what's. And at the end of it, I'm going to show you a demo of the product, right? Of course, we are a vendor, so I'll keep it as vendor neutral as possible, because what we want to share is our journey, the things that we learned, and the decisions that we made. Okay. A little bit about my background. Why am I here? I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've founded 4 companies with 4 exits. Each of them has been in a different space. The last one was a data security company, which was acquired by Netscope. That's why I am with Netscope right now. So that's number 1. Number 2, I've also worked at really large companies like McKinsey, HP, and the Tatas. So I have had the exposure of running big businesses in very large organizations. So I have the startup experience and the large company experience. So I can see what companies want to do and how we can move quickly. I love to write. I love to paint. I brew beer at home, and I travel. This, of course, is one of my paintings. I am an optimist. Every day, every minute, I think that all the problems can be solved. I think of businesses as problems waiting to be solved and monetized. So when businesses say there is a problem, I love it. Why? Because if you can solve it, you got that much better. And if you do it every day, it gets better and better. So yes, I have run startups, and yes, there is the stress of revenues and payrolls and things like that. But you're building something meaningful. That can happen in a small company, but it also happens in large companies. And so I request everybody to think about everyday and everyday challenges as things that make the world better. I live in California. I am freezing here.
So are we.
So a little bit about Netscope, and I'll go through it super quickly. Netscope is a pre-IPO company. We have about 3,500 customers, and you can kind of see in financial services, 3 of the largest ones, the largest 5 companies. In healthcare, it's 4 of the 5. And so everywhere that we go, we are really, really good. One of the secret things that separates us on the data security side is our use of AI, ML, and our experience with these 3,500 companies. Like, imagine the knowledge we have gained over the last several years working with these large companies across multiple. So that's the plug for the company. So I know this visual is probably not appropriate with the snow that you guys got, but if you think about data security, it is a perfect storm. And this perfect storm is made out of external factors and internal factors. Some of it comes from aspirations, and some of it comes from bad actors, right? Resultantly, all of us are trying to handle a bunch of risks. And the thing is that we talk about remediation, but the first thing is like our understanding of risk and how much are we going to completely solve for, okay? Now, when you think of data, data is not a monolith. It is in multiple forms, which means it could be on-prem, it could be in the cloud, right? It could be structured, it could be unstructured. It could be sitting with corporate IT, or it could also be run by small BUs that you don't even know are running those services. This is the nature. And now imagine AI playing in this world. What a fun place to be, right? Now, if I were to structure this data in a slightly different way, data can either be at rest or in motion, and it sits in different places in different forms. So if you think about it, there is endpoint where data could be sitting. You could have emails, you could have private apps. A lot of the data nowadays is sitting in SaaS applications. There is data that is sitting in infrastructure as a service, like the hyperscalers. You would have platform as a service, like the snowflakes of the world. And then in the cloud, and these are databases, data lakes, data warehouses. And when you look there is structured data, there is semi-structured data, there is unstructured data, and we have to deal with all of that. Now, there isn't a single solution that actually solves it, because each form is different, each type of movement is different. And so what I've done here is I have actually shown the kind of solutions, though this actually represents Netscope's portfolio, but you can take almost any solution and you can see if, for example, if you're looking at something that is SaaS, you need a CASB API, right? Now, as users, as practitioners, one of the biggest challenges is that for each of these point problems, we are getting a point solution because it is either cheaper or this is like the latest. There is a problem in that approach. The problem in that approach is, yes, for that point product or for that point problem, you may have a great solution, but you're unable to use the context that is generated when that solution is running. So for example, can I take the intelligence of alerts coming from, let's say, on-prem databases to my DLP solution? How am I going to do that? So you will see as I go deeper into the presentation that in the end, security practitioners, all of us, have three great tools when we are dealing with such complexity: duct tape, Band-Aid, and chewing gum. Like, think about how many times we know this is best effort and we know this is not enough, right? And we have to first in our mindset move away from like, this is going to continue to happen. We have to say that there is a better world, right? So with that, I actually come to this, like, why are we all here in this room? The reason why we are all here in this room is because we want to build a better data-driven world. Now, what does that mean? So if you think about the use of data today in the world, it means you're collecting more data. Whether there is a use today or not, we know that if we collect the data, sometime in the future, somebody will be able to use it, right? So the number of data stores goes up, right? Every time somebody joins a company, we give them data access. What happens is it's not just that a single person is added to the access, but with every innovation, they're using data in even more ways. Like the same team may be using data in 5 ways, and they get this super creative guy, and that person uses data in an additional way, right? And so what happens is when you extrapolate it against risk, the line goes up and to the right. This year, it may be like the arrowhead may be sitting here, but next year it would be outside the slide. That's not sustainable, right? So what we have to do is we have to automate data security and governance controls. This is different from remediation. And I will show it to you in a couple of slides. So what that means is if I have some high quality guardrails in place around my infrastructure, around my access control rules, even when you add more data stores, this line stays flat, right? Because those automated tools are always already working. And so basically, fundamentally, this is the risk reduction we are all trying to do. It's never going to go to zero, but it'll come to a manageable, insurable value. Okay. So that was the why. So how do we think about this problem? The way to think about this problem is fundamentally 4 questions. It's actually very simple. 4 questions. Where is my data? What data do I have? Who has access to it? And how are they interacting with it? Like imagine, are there any, like if you have the answer to these 4 questions in any company, how close are you to understanding and feeling comfortable with your data? The problem is that this happens in a super complex environment. And this is what you can see, and this is just limited, but larger companies will have multiple flavors of this and several flavors that you don't even know exist, right? And like I said, the current way of thinking about it is duct tape, Band-Aid, and chewing gum. This cannot continue. So here I will kind of step back a little bit and tell you the story of what we did about 5 years back. So 5 years back, my Coinbase account got hacked, right? And it was an insider issue from AT&T that switched the IMEI. There's a whole big article around that. About the same time, I met my brilliant co-founder who had just finished his PhD at UC Berkeley. And he was working on privacy-preserving algorithms. The two of us got together and we started a company. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to figure out where was risk coming from inside the company. Okay. Resultantly, what we came up with eventually was an automated tool that could connect the dots. And last year, as part of the journey, we were acquired by Netscope. And that product is now available through Netscope. And that basically covers the matrix that I showed you. All right. So it happens in 3 steps, like every security product. One is visibility. Second is you have some policy controls. And then finally, you remediate it. I'm not going to spend too much time because you guys will have the slides. You can make your notes from there. So how does that translate into the 4 questions? Where is my data? So the first thing that we do is that we go and scan your infrastructure. And it could be on-prem, it could be in the cloud, it could be databases, data lakes, data warehouses, it could be SaaS solutions. We scan it all. When we scan it, what we have found in most situations is that there are data stores that practitioners didn't know existed. It's almost universally across all of our customers, we see this. When we ask them how many data stores do you have, they will come up with a number. We will do a scan and the inventory will show data stores they didn't know existed. Why? Because there was this intern who had come for 2 months, who was given access, and he went, but because there was a script running, nobody wanted to shut it down because you don't know what service would bring. And it happens over and over and over again. And it is independent of the size of the company. Like, it's not like it's a big company problem. It's a small company problem. It's a medium-sized company problem. It's a big company problem. The second thing that we do is that we automatically classify all of the data. And then we label it, which is what I'm calling tagging. Why do we label it? See, the thing is, classification of data is kind of table stakes in this space. But what happens after classification is that you will go to the data owner, if you know who the data owner is in that data store, and you will tell them to label it. Data owners have hundreds of thousands of columns. This is not going to be a weekend project where they're going to waste their weekends. It's not going to happen. Even the most diligent people, when 2 people are set to do the same task, they label those differently. Now you take all of these labels and you're probably running your access control rules based on this. Because the rules are, because the label is broken, so is your access control, right? And so the next thing that we do is we connect with directory services and we figure out who are the people in the company, and then we overlay it into database access. So if there is a person that I see who has access to database but is not in my Okta or my Entra or my Active Directory, I can say that this is a ghost user. I'll show that to you if we have time today. And then data interaction. So this is very interesting. So like I said, Noah did his PhD from UC Berkeley. He was working on privacy-preserving algorithms. However, as a byproduct, he had to pull out queries that were running. Okay? The way to think about it is, imagine that you have a nephew or a niece from out of town who wants to borrow your car. Okay? So what do you do?
No. Start with no.
Yeah. So what you do is you make sure that the brakes are working. You make sure there is gas in the tank. You make sure that the papers are up to date, which is your classification, and then you give them the keys, which is access. What you don't know is how are they going to drive once they get access. This is the same problem with data. You may do all of these housekeeping items, and then when you give them the data, you don't know how they're going to use it. So a real problem is data security, and our solution in DSPM, this is the DSPM space, these three columns. The fourth one is not DSPM. These three columns is a probabilistic approach. It's posture. We know how the Russia-Ukraine war is going, posture. Right? It looked like it would be over in a week. Right? That is the problem with posture. You think you've solved the problem, but you haven't, because you don't have a deterministic way of solving that problem. So this is what came out of Noah's research. We were looking at the data and we realized that when individuals or applications are talking to databases and asking something of data, they are using a language. And that language is a query language. It's SQL or SQL-like queries, right? Now, SQL and SQL-like queries, when you go talk to companies, they'll say, oh, we look at queries. What they mean is that they look at fields in queries. But the reality is queries have a syntax. It's a living language where people are saying something to the data and to the database, and the database is returning something. What we figured out was that if we could understand that language, we would be able to predict the intent of every query in the company. So we created a tool which runs in simulation mode. So it's not looking at network traffic. It is not rerunning the query on the database. What it is doing is that in simulation mode, it goes to the query logs, looks at that query and says, if this query ran today, these are the risks that would come out, right? And that is the layer that we brought on top of this. So when you deploy a solution that we have, you get all of this DSPM stuff, but more importantly, you begin to get like, where is the actual risk coming when people are using the data? Now, what does that mean? It also means, since we know where the queries are coming from, you can stack rank every single person by the risk that they generate for the company when they touch data. People say data is money. There is an accounting system to understand how people are spending money. There isn't an accounting system to understand how people are using data. What risk do they bring in? And so for the first time, we're able to do that. Okay. And anyway, so, like I said, you saw the previous slide. We pull it all together. We provide this visibility. We provide this risk assessment. We have some policies, and then we automatically remediate those. Okay. So the rest is how are we differentiated as a company? We used to be an independent company. One of the things that we realized is that we had these workflows and other companies had to go solve it. Right. So for example, if there is a risky user, I can't prevent access. I have to tell somebody else to go prevent access. And we realized that this was happening upstream and downstream. And so when we got together with Netscope, one of the best things that happened was that there was this single pane of glass where you can actually write policies for, let's say, one database and say, now deploy it for the entire company, no matter where data sits. Imagine the power of that. Because you can understand one database really well, right? And then you say, you know what, this is working here. I want to extend it to the rest of the company. So you can do that. The second is one of the biggest tools that has been in use, but was never very effective for security practitioners was DLP. Think of the place, how complex DLP is. Because the number of conditions required to make it happen, the context that it has to get didn't exist before, but now it does. So when you connect these two, it becomes like really, really good. And of course, real-time protection because of the breadth of services that Netscope has. So I'm going to stop presenting here. Do we have time for a demo? Yeah. Okay, great. So from water and then, yeah, please.
On the previous slide, when you showed the data interaction, I think if I understood you correctly, you said the query fields versus the intent of the query.
The syntax, yeah.
If I'm looking at it, if the query is accessing, say, sensitive information versus is there a difference between those two? Like I
Yeah.
can look at the query fields and tell the
Great question. So I'll actually rephrase this question in a real-time situation, right? Let's say you've got two people who work in the same department, have the same access. They sit across from each other. They are using company computers. And this is Wednesday at 11:30 a.m., right? So all the UE bar tools will say these people are both safe. And they have access to the same data, right? One writes a select star query. The other person writes a count query. So the person who wrote the select star query downloaded a bunch of data, while the person who wrote the count query got a statistical number that, let's say, this table has got 59,000 records. So the second person was safer than the first person. Now imagine in real life, what would have happened is there would be a 40-line nested query which was never used in the company, pulling from 15 tables, being used by 5,000 people in a company. How are you going to figure out which was a risky query? That is what this tool does.
So you go back to that one slide where you had a chart. It was like the risk from data and the data store and data access. So you were saying there, yes, sir. It was nothing. Then you had just the first one. It was like a red and orange line. Yes.
Yes.
So you're saying
I love this
automation,
slide.
it's like a Band-Aid or like more duct tape.
Yeah.
Would you say automations lean more to those SQL injections and attacks?
Can you rephrase your question? I
Do you
didn't.
think automation is leading to more vulnerabilities actually?
Yeah, good question. The way to think about automation is to think about a bicycle.
Right.
A bicycle is an automation tool. Why? Because you pedal and you go faster. You can take the bicycle wherever you want to. So it's not automation, but the person behind the automation who actually would be responsible. So when you think about AI, and one of the issues with AI is ethical use of AI and what is training data, what is not training data, what is going to be pulled, not pulled. Again, automation, what it does is it amplifies. The good gets amplified and the bad gets amplified, right? So the answer to your question is yes. However, when you start looking at queries, not only just as individuals, but also applications, like if you think about BI tools like Tableau, Looker, Periscope, in the back end, they're actually running queries. You may be interfacing with something, but in the back end, it is queries. Now, we can understand those queries. Not just that, like in our tool, for example, what we are able to do is we are able to inspect the query and we are able to figure out the username and then reconcile it with your Okta directory. So it's no longer that Periscope is looking for this data. It'll say Ani is using Periscope to look for this data. And that insight is getting added to Ani's profile, not to Periscope's profile, for example.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
On the slide about your 4 columns, if you keep going forward.
Yeah.
One more. There you go. So when you say things like, we are going to scan your whole environment and we're going to inspect everything.
Yeah.
That usually makes certain people like red flags and their neck get really scary. So how is that done? Is it agent-based or is it root access? Is like, people get really nervous when you say, we're going to scan your everything.
Yeah, I didn't say we are going to scan everything.
Okay.
Okay, so
I maybe it's the wine.
we don't know. Yeah. But it's a great question. So the way to think about data is to look for patterns, right? So if you have enough data points to look for patterns, you don't have to, for example, let's say you want to figure out if you want to start a restaurant in a certain neighborhood, which is going to have primarily savory food or sweet food, you will go sample, let's say 5,000 people, while the neighborhood could be 50,000 people, and you'll get a sense of it. What happens when you look at all of the data is that the precision goes up, meaning that you will hit more decimal points after, So the second part of your question is, how do we do this? Firstly, for cloud-based solutions, you can use APIs. They're quite mature. But when it comes to on-prem, for example, let's say there's an Oracle database or a DB2 or a SQL database, which is on-prem, then we use something called a sidecar, which is the same intelligence of our application. But what it does is that it does its compute on-prem and sends us the metadata. We actually don't store any data. We only store metadata. Now, one double click into that question is also how do we understand that this is truly the case? So we use two types of signals, meta signals and data signals. So meta signals is, for example, I'm just going to use structured data as an example. What was the column name? What other columns existed with it? When queries are generally run, what other columns are queried with it? So that is meta signal, and it tells us a lot. Then what we do is we take data signals, which is sampling the data, and we do very, very, very light sampling because we have such richness from the meta signals. So with this light sampling, we are able to combine the two, and we are able to tell you what it is. And when I do the demo, you will realize we actually figured out that one of the biggest problems in all of this classification is false positives. How many people say that it is a big problem, right? False positives. But what we realized is that false positives has a root cause. And what is the root cause? The root cause of false positive is somebody putting a threshold that is incorrect. So for example, I am getting a certain number of data points, and let's say it looks like cities. And if it hits 60%, let's say I'm going to say that it is cities. Okay. Now it is possible that there are product names that look like cities. There was not enough signal, and I say it's a city. That's a false positive because somebody put a threshold of 60. And there is the other side of false positive is false negative. At that same 60, it is possible that there are city names, but the signal was not strong enough. So you didn't call out that it was a city. So that's a false negative, which means the root cause was that 60 number that somebody picked. So what we did in our product is that we actually expose our confidence level in our classifier in the product. So you can say that here the confidence level is 51. I want to take a look at it. But guess what? There are 100,000 of them at 51. Only 10 of that data is used. So I don't have to inspect 90. No one is using that data. That's a different question. But it reduces the task of human review to about 1% of what it is today. Okay, and I'll quickly jump into the product and show that to you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Netscope is kind of very big in SASE market, also another stuff, right?
And beating them.
Pardon?
And beating them.
And where does the DSPM actually fits in their SASE architecture? Is it part of like CASB or?
Yeah, no. So CASB, for example, so let me go.
Because CASB is I see that as a component of SASE.
Yeah, so it is, DSPM is also a component of SASE.
Component.
Yeah. It is, see, if you think about it, it is primarily data security, right? Here it is.
Okay.
So when you think about CASB API, SSPM, and structured data in the cloud databases, etc., so this creates the DSPM thing. And when you think of all of this together, this is SASE.
Okay.
And of course, Gartner will invent something new when, as the space evolves. So
when you were talking about the data interaction, the SQL queries, right? How do you guys protect against the data aggregation? While
you can just write policies. I'll show you that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing is that why don't I actually go to the product, right? I'm sure there's going to be more questions.
Yeah.
So when we were building this product about 5 years back, we had 3 underlying principles we wanted to follow. The first principle that we wanted to follow was the level of automation. Because data is so overwhelming, if you tell humans to do it, it's just not possible. It's a waste of time. In fact, it just makes work life really bad. So if you could reduce the load on people, they would have higher quality of interactions at their job. So that was one. The second one was we also wanted to make sure that any insights that we show should be human comprehensible and actionable, which basically means that I don't want to show anything that humans cannot make sense of or look patterns in. So this was number 2. And number 3, there is so much investment in security already and in data infrastructure, that it has to fit in and work nicely with everybody. Okay. So what you will see, and this is a risk I take every time I do a demo, is that this is from scratch. So I haven't preloaded anything. I have taken 2 shortcuts to make it faster. I've connected it with my cloud infrastructure, and I've connected it with Okta. And nothing else. Everything else that you see is first-time user experience. Okay. Starts off, of course, by agreeing to the terms and conditions. All right. So as you can see, my cloud infrastructure is AWS, GCP, and Azure. If there was Oracle, it would be here. If there was Databricks, it would all be here. It is tempting to say single pane of glass. I just feel that single pane of glass is underplaying this. Why is it underplaying? Because single pane of glass kind of makes you feel you're looking at something. But the reason why all of this is in one place is because you can write a single rule and get to proliferate it wherever you want it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on AWS for now. Because these are connected, it has automatically discovered 15 data stores here, 6 here, and 5 here. So if I click on it, here is the list of discovered data stores. At this point, if you're a large company, we have scripts that will onboard all of the organization or parts of the organization, or you can also do it individually. For the demo, I'm going to add 2 data stores, one structured, one unstructured, and I'll do it manually. So I'm going to hit connect. It picks up a bunch of stuff like how often do I want to scan it. Next, classification, everything is on. I hit save. It's going to look for permissions. And it's in. It started scanning. Okay. I'll go back here and I'll take an S3 bucket. It's got unstructured data. These are small samples for the purpose of a demo, but again, it's got some stuff pre-selected. I hit save and can get started. Okay. So while this scan happens, we will let it run. I also connected it with Okta, and it's still populating. There it is. So in Okta, as you can see, there are several fields it automatically pulls in, but you can also start tagging certain groups. So for example, a part of legal may be doing some special audit. You could say audit group, and then you can write some policies around that. This is also used generally for data residency situations where you may have data that is sitting in Europe. You don't want US employees to get all of the access, so you can kind of use this part. Okay. Let's go see how is this going. The scanning is still on. And again, if you wanted to add more stuff, you could just do it here. In this particular situation, there is AWS, pretty much a lot of stuff covered. GCP is covered. Azure is covered. Cloud platforms like Snowflake, Databricks, on-prem data stores, including NFS volumes. There are other connectors as well that you can use this for. This is like a subset. Yeah.
In order to connect, like how are you getting on?
Yeah. So for cloud, it is we just get a read-only access.
Okay.
And for on-prem, like I said, we have a sidecar. And even that is a very interesting technology because yes, we have the sidecar, but we've got multiple sidecars that can be spawned out, and there's a fleet management intelligence built into that. So it's quite efficient. We have companies that are Fortune 20 companies in healthcare, which are like super large. And then we also have companies that are just 3,000 people or 1,000 people. And all of these companies and in between can use it.
Does it matter what your underlying hypervisor is? If you're using Nutanix, if you're using VMware, if you're using Proxmox, if you're using Hyper-V, doesn't matter what your underlying.
It depends on what protocols you're using. We focus on the protocol rather than the hardware itself.
How often do you scan those data stores? Because you're just making API calls at this point, right? So
Yeah.
how often do you scan?
So you can set it up. You can set it up every 5 minutes. You can set it up once a week, like whatever works for you. And there is also intelligence built in. So the way we scan data is because we use sampling. For us, it really doesn't matter if your database went from 1 million records to 2 million records. If the structure is still the same rules will apply. And that is the strength of this platform, right? Now, if you want to replicate 50 of these, it doesn't matter if the structure is the same. Whenever a query is written or whenever access is given, it is still following that structure. So in fact, our customers, this is a very interesting thing that we've done. It's not based on data volume. It is actually based on the number of data stores and your data structure. So you could just become 10 times the company, right? And if you not change the structure, your billing is not going to become 10 times.
So do you scan from
We have some different types of algorithms which we don't share in public forums.
Proprietary.
Yeah, but a good question.
14.
Yeah, but there is intelligence built into that.
There was a question on Zoom.
Oh, sorry.
It said, Lou, did you do the question? I couldn't read it all.
What?
Yeah, in integrations with AWS massive.
Messi, yeah. Yeah. We've got a lot of integrations. I just don't cover everything here. Yeah.
My only last question.
Yeah.
Is, so with the findings you're saying, that's you demonstrated the product, do you see the need for IP access management being a bigger priority when it comes to security posture?
Again, good question. So his question is like, do we think that identity and access management has a bigger role?
Now,
The answer is it always had a role. It was not intelligent enough to do more stuff. So let me give you an example, right?
sorry.
So let's say you think about the analog locks that we have, right? The physical ones, you use a key. Right? And then there are digital locks where you know who actually accessed, right? Think about, there is this key, you can give it to somebody, maybe your gardener, you should not have access to your safe using that key. What should happen is that the gardener can come only up to your garden, your cleaner can get inside the house, right? And your wife can have access to the safe, right? The point is that access control has to be like this, but access control has not been like this. It's been very binary. It's like either you have access or not. When you begin to think about now query analysis, now you can have controls in terms of usage of the same data, right? And so the role becomes more intelligent and more nuanced and more parsed. People's roles change in the company, but you have to physically go change their access roles. That shouldn't be the case. It should automatically happen. And that happens here.
What if like I'm on the struggle bus one day trying to perform some type of command that I want to run and I'm just messing it up constantly? Is it smart enough to pick up that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I will show you a data exfiltration example, and that's like phenomenal. Yeah, good.
Quick question. Is this only web-based or can you download the software to scan?
So the sidecar does that.
Okay.
So if you're,
Please repeat the question.
yeah, okay. So for those on Zoom, the question was, can I download the software that does the scanning and the tagging and things like that? The answer to that question is yes. That is done through the sidecar. And the sidecar can be deployed on-prem, but it can also actually be deployed in the cloud. But most companies that we work with, they prefer using the APIs because it's, the management overhead is a lot less.
Let me change the question.
Yeah. Sorry.
SSN and similar numbers.
Oh, great question. This is a maturity question, meaning like how mature is your platform? Netscope has got 3,000 identifiers. We've got about 30, bring your own ML tool. So for example, you can actually use our tool and put your data through it and it'll classify. It covers about 140 countries. So it's like very, very nuanced. Also, I'll give you a couple of good examples. This is a very interesting question. So when we started the company, one of our customers was one of those companies where you can pay in parts when you're buying something, like pay in 4 installments, 5 installments. I won't name the company. And we were doing a scanning and it said credit card, and Our system said it's not credit card, it's not sensitive. The 16 digits, like exactly as a credit card should be. And it says credit card on the top of the column. And so this got flagged as a bug by the customer. And we said, yeah, of course, this is a bug. And so we looked at it and the algorithm was working fine. What we realized, and which we didn't know, was that our algorithm cross-referenced it to credit card issuer numbers and verified that the first four digits did not match that. And this was actually synthetic credit card number, which had just made its way into their production database. Like that is what is coming in the future. It's already happening. We just don't see it enough. Okay. So coming back to the demo. So what happens is when you're in a company, here I just added 2 data stores, but what will happen is that you will have 100 data stores. So where do you start? And so what we did was we came up with a single number. And this single number for those on Zoom is this column here, which is 79 and 70. And what happens is if you've got 100 data stores, all of them are stack ranked by the risk. Now the question is, where did you find this risk? I'll come to that. But additional to that particular number, we also automatically tag it for all of the compliance requirements. Okay. So we also automatically tag it for all of the compliance requirements this has to meet. So even at the data store level, you know what the risk is, you know what standards it has to follow. Now, how did we get this number? So I'm going to open up the Redshift one just to show you an example. We automatically look at the structure of the data inside. How many tables, how many schemas. We have some out-of-the-box algorithms that will look at the queries themselves. It'll say how many queries were run, how many of them are risky based on global benchmarks. We are able to say where there is a configuration issue. We are able to say, for example, privilege analysis, shadow data, all of this shows up at the first instance, like at the data store level. But when you kind of go a little deeper, because this has now classified the data, you will see that, I'm going to stop here. You will see that the first few columns is actually coming from the data store itself. Okay, but then it gets interesting. Then the query analysis tool begins to say, has this data been used by people? So it's like this cell phone thing, which is a high, medium, low, or no, or not used. Now you begin to see which part of your data is used the most. Like what is the currency that is in use? Added to that, we also automatically, because of query analysis, we are also able to figure out who's using it. And then we are able to show them what is the risk profile associated with each of those users of data. And I'll come to the risk profile of users. It's very, very interesting. Okay. The next thing that I was talking about was confidence. So here, for example, is we have surfaced the confidence of our classifier. The classification is on the right side, and here is our confidence, right? So imagine if you could write a policy which says high usage data, if the confidence is under 60%, the data owner needs to review it. You could write a policy, the data owner would get a task with only just that column, and then they can go review it. And the way they would review it is by clicking on something like this. It would pull a sample. This is happening in real time, in memory. So we are not, I'm going to just close it. In real time, in memory, so we are not storing anything. Once that is done, they can, for example, say, yeah, this is the data it was supposed to be. The moment you do that, it already created an audit trail, like who verified it, right? As part of the data, we also automatically mark it for sensitivity. This is based on global benchmarks, but a company can go change it. So for example, if this is medium, your company thinks that should be low, you can just make it low, no problem. Similarly, if you look at the tags, just like we did with the data store, every type of data is actually tagged for compliance. And from here, I'm going to jump into a policy, and you will see how this is used in the policy itself. Any questions so far?
I have one question.
Yes, please.
So you said that, okay, we identify the data and we try to map it to the user. Generally, when I see AWS, GCP, the users are mostly service accounts. We're not talking about
company users being mapped here. So how
I
can
will
you
show
say
it.
that these users are, okay, these 15 or
Yeah, I'll show
200
you.
users within them?
I will show it to you.
And just to add to his question,
Yes.
what do you do when most of them are ephemeral as well, right? One of the biggest challenges that you have with cloud, unlike on-prem, right, is static accounts go away. Most of them are ephemeral as well. And when you're actually using containerized platforms that actually access data dynamically, then ephemeral accounts become even more challenging because you can't associate it with static permissions as well. And when you're not continuously scanning information or scanning the permissions on these data stores, how do you aggregate it at that point?
Good question. The way to think about it is if there is data or evidence available, we will go get it. For example, there are companies that have disabled query analysis. It is there in the product, not in our product, like the database product they're using, and they've switched it off. Why? Because they want to save cost. If 7 days later somebody said that you had a breach, they have no way to go find that information, right? In those situations, we can't do anything, right? If there is no evidence, like what are we going to be looking for? So what you're saying is a really gray area because these are still evolving and the tooling around that is also evolving. Okay, all right. Let's move a little faster. I know I am between, yeah, we probably have 10 minutes. Okay, so the reason why we are doing all of this drama is because we want to put some business rules in place. Like that is the end all of this, right? And so I'm not going to walk you through the policies that we ship with, but I'm going to create something together, right? That is going to be more interesting. Okay. Now, the thing about data security is this. The people who write the PDF documents, thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do that, the compliance team hands it off to the security team, right? Now, the security team is looking at this and they're saying, well, first I have to go to the IT team, and then I have to go to the data owner, right? This is the kind of team sport it is, which is the security practitioner is stuck with the task itself. So the way we made this platform was that anybody should be able to write policies if they're a stakeholder, okay? When you look at this policy, it has got 3 parts. What am I trying to do? What are the conditions that have to be created? And what happens if those conditions are not met? What workflow should take off? So the first thing to do is to look at this very confusing dropdown, right? But it's not really confusing. It represents your data lifecycle. A data store is created, it is configured, data is brought in, somebody is given access, then data operations start. When there are data operations, 2 types of risk are the greatest ones: data exfiltration and privacy violation. That's it. It's very, very straightforward. What we will do is we will write a policy for data exfiltration for a company. And let's see how long it takes while I explain it as well. Okay, so I'm going to say this is CSA. I'm going to say next. What conditions? First condition is what data set. So I could actually go here and go super narrow, right? So Citadel was the S3 and engineering was the Redshift. So I can go super narrow. I can like pick one here, or I could say, select all. So let's do it select all because we want the whole company to be covered. The next one is what kind of data. This is where tables and schemas, remember? So now you need a PhD in the company's architecture, but not with what we built. So you can basically say what kind of data. I will say compliance data and PII data. That's it. We just define what data. Who is it for? Because we have connected Okta, I will add a condition. I will say the department is. I'm going to say select all. And then I remember legal is doing audits. I don't want alerts from them. Uncheck it. And this is a policy. Done. Okay. We don't know at this stage, is this a good policy? Is it a bad policy? Right? So what we did was we learned from how the stock market writes algorithms. So they write an algorithm, then they look at the history, and then they see how would the algorithm had performed if that algorithm existed then. So we learned from that. So we go to the data, the query logs now, and we run this. I'm going to test the policy, and it runs it. And it realizes that there are 12 instances where this would have triggered something. The problem in this particular situation is you can see that there were results with like 1 record exfiltrated right up to 1.5 million. So obviously they need two different workflows, right? So I'm going to go back to the editor and I'm going to say that my first workflow is going to focus only on the large ones. So rows produced is, let's say 100,000, right? And I test the policy. 12, it went down to 4. Only the large ones show up. I return to the editor. I say next. And then I can say, do you want to automatically deactivate the user? Do you want to send a Lambda for remediation? Do you want to push it to Splunk or ServiceNow? And for example, if you want to be more creative, you can use SNS topics, webhooks, pops up to define whatever you want to do. Okay, I'm going to exit this. I'm going to say save. That's it. We just created a data exfiltration policy for the entire company. Okay. Now, the magic of all of this comes together in alerts. Remember alert overload, but it's so much fun here. So you go to alerts, and in alerts, here's the CSA ones, right? So what I'm going to do is, maybe there are many of these, so I can just go search. I can say, okay, CSA. The moment I do that, these 4 show up. I can see there was a data exfiltration policy that got triggered. Fabio was the person who kind of triggered it. If I open it, there's a select star query, too simple. Here is a more complicated query, and I can see the rows produced. I can see what workflow got triggered. I can see the query itself. I can see the fields that were impacted from this one panel. In fact, I can go click on Fabio because his name shows up a few times. And this is his risk profile across all data in my company. So this is his overall risk. This is the number of alerts. This is the time series of queries run versus alerts. I can see what data stores he has access to. I can see what sensitive fields he has access to, all of his alerts, all of his queries. And if you want to learn it for the whole company, there it is. The entire company is actually stack ranked by risk. There was a question around what about service accounts, right? So I'm going to skip from here to service accounts because the ones that you don't see any email addresses or departments, these are roles that don't have corresponding, like somebody created an IT guy created a backdoor, right? And so the way to solve it is actually not here. If you go to user identities, there are unlinked users. So unlinked users are basically ghost users who do not have an Okta identity or an Active Directory identity, but have a database identity. So now if I were to inspect this, it says Periscope. So if this is Periscope, I can go link it. I can say it's a service account. I can add Periscope here, save, done. And so what happened now? This is not just marked as a service account. Now we go inspect the queries coming from that differently. We are looking at the query and we are seeing the commented in user name. And we are now figuring out this username is actually this person. And so we now begin to aggregate that information as well. Similarly, if this was a person, so let's go to another one. So let's say L. Bradshaw is a person. Oops, sorry.
Nothing but the role-based access, right?
Correct. Yeah. So for example, if L. Bradshaw is here, I can link and basically say, oh, this is employee directory and the list of employees will be here and you can basically connect that. So this is how it works. We've got 3 more minutes. I want to quickly cover the dashboard. So we have a dashboard that summarizes everything so that once you set it up, you can see the movement, whether you're in progress or losing ground. And the way we have created the score is actually based out of the 4 questions. Where is my data? What data do I have? Who has access to it? And how are they using it, right? So because we were doing risky usage, let's go click on that. And you can see like the risks are actually listed here. So I'm going to click on this. We already did data exfiltration. Let's look at privacy violation. I click on this. Immediately, I see all of the queries that were privacy violating. I can have recommended actions based on the platform that I'm using, and I can modify the risk rules around it. That's kind of it. Last point, I'm going to just skip to the end of this, is that one of the things that we learned was that yes, there is some cybersecurity training, which is they'll send you phishing emails and you'll take a class. But what you don't know is how do you stack rank people and train even departments for good use or bad use of data? This was a thing that was very close to us, and we want to coach people. And so what we did was, for example, if you look at the first example, this is overprivileged user. Yes, we have stack ranked people, but we have also stack ranked departments. So what that means is engineering is over permissioned. So now you can write tighter access rules for engineering. Similarly, if you look at risky data usage, you can see that sales here is downloading more data than they should. And you can go inspect, like, what are they downloading? Are they downloading like customer information? Like, what is going on here, right? So that kind of is what I wanted to cover. And I really appreciate your patience, and I'm happy to take some more questions. Yes.
When you have a new tool,
Mhm.
gives you new insight, maybe things you haven't done before.
Mhm.
Hardest challenge, I would say, is making sure the right people is using it
Mm.
to get the most out of it. So where in an organization would you find someone either maybe already pre-trained or ready
Mm.
to use the tool, or the best position to get the most out of it?
It's a great question. I stopped sharing, but I could have shown it to you. In our platform, we have got a very detailed RBAC and federation system. In large companies, each business and each function know the context of their business. Expecting one person to do all of this is not fair. And so what we have done is we've got very extensive customer success teams that help onboard. We've done many of these. The documentation is really good. And the product is very intuitive. I have been to QBRs where, where I would meet with the CISO and I would say, okay, let's sit down about the QBR. He said, wait, before you open any slides. And I'm thinking, like, what did we screw up, right? And he basically said, he showed me the task list and he said, see, all the tasks are done. It is so intuitive. And so to your question, I think one of the things that we security companies have not done is upped our game to make it easy to work. Like, if Slack can be easy to use, why aren't security tools intuitive? And that is the bar to which we hold ourselves. But there is some training required, yeah. Yes.
Okay, so as you know, that, for example, CrowdStrike
Yep.
is in the kernel.
Yep.
Now, CrowdStrike could also flag this as a system, maybe.
That is why we work with them.
Okay.
In the rise of generative AI, like how Netscope like adopting the new challenges, like how
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are multiple levels here. So Netscope has a separate team which is working on generative AI as a separate product. On the data security side, because we are looking at service accounts, we are able to recognize what is accessing this data. When we do that, we are able to, just like I added it as a service account, I could say, like, let's say it's a generative AI tool which is now accessing your data. I can tell you whether it is using the data that it should be using or not. I think that, like I said, generative AI just amplifies and brings forth the problems we already have in companies. We have to get our data hygiene up. It isn't in a place like go ask most of the people in a room and ask them, do you have answers to these 4 questions? Forget generative AI, forget people. Where is my data? What data do I have? Who has access to it? And how? Nobody has access. Like, nobody has that confidence today. And I think if we get that right, the rest will gradually fall in place. It's kind of going back to the basics, but making it easy.
Back to the single pane where you were saying, like, you figure out one database, get it locked down. How often do you see customers doing that and then actually spreading it to all their databases?
Oh yeah, good question. About 30% of our customers, I'm not sharing the rest of the information here. 30% of our customers have grown 100x in their use of the product. Like, they started with a handful of data stores, and within a year, it was like 100x. Like, I want this for the rest of my company. On the Dasera website, which was the company that got acquired, there is a testimonial from a CISO. And he basically says, what used to take me multiple weeks and multiple people to look for that information, to reach out to multiple people, I can do it personally myself in 5 minutes. Like, that is the benchmark that we've set for ourselves. Yes.
Coming back to the same data aggregation question, right?
Sure.
You put the policy and everything.
Mhm.
For suppose today I access some table some database which is non-sensitive, so your tool might not trigger any alert. 3 months later, pull in some other sensitive data, non-sensitive data, and 3 months after that, and then I do the aggregation, right?
Yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah,
You
so-
will sense it.
So it will sense it.
Yeah.
So
You can write policies like that, aggregate what you're doing.
So for example, we implement strict separation of duty and somebody has some
Yeah.
non-sensitive and somebody else has non-sensitive.
Yeah.
Would it be able to detect that?
Yeah, because the thing is that I showed a very simple use case where I just took department. You could do it by role. Like, for example, an intern can and cannot get the same data in a marketing use case that a full-time employee can get. You can do all of that.
Yeah, but there is no way of telling that the data, you cannot detect if a data the intern gets
Yeah.
is not shared by a full-time employee. The collision between two employees, that cannot be detected, right? So if I come in, I get some data, and you
Yeah.
come in and you get something else, and we sit together to
Yeah. So you know what happens in a situation like that? That is why we are part of a broader platform. The Netscope what we do is we signal the DLP system that this is happening. Be careful with where this data goes. The demo I did was in isolation. Now imagine us pushing all of this context to the broader platform. In fact, we recently demoed something where somebody wrote a risky query, somebody wrote a semi-risky query, and somebody wrote a simple query. The simple non-risky query went through, no problem. When the semi-risky query was written, it popped up a window saying, okay, what is your business justification for this? And when there was a risky query, it just blocked it. So that's where we are going. So this was done internally. It's not productized yet, but that's the direction we are taking. This is going to be like by far the most advanced use of data because of the data usage that we can track. Yes, please.
But that's when you presume that they actually know what they're doing and they're doing SQL, right? If they're just a user on like Tableau or some interface,
Yes.
they're just pulling things in. You know, they might not even technically know what they're doing. You can fly even a dangerous, risky query
Yeah.
through an interface.
Yes, and that's what I think you just left the room.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
So when you link a BI tool like Tableau, Looker, Periscope, in the backend, they are also writing SQL queries. What we do with service accounts is that we look inside the query itself for the username, and then we connect that username with their Okta identity.
So it's not just Tableau is running the query,
No, once you link that, we were
then Tableau is running it.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's a great question. That's a real use case.
What is your tool?
The orchestration capability that you were talking about.
Yes,
Do you have that in GA now?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, like we've got customers who are using this to certify that they are HIPAA compliant. So
Yeah, how does your tool?
Netscope
Sorry.
one, is it same as Netscope?
yeah, so the
security?
platform is called Netscope One. So what we have done is we have understood that the weakness in security is that context is not permeable to adjacent systems that have to work together, which means my left hand doesn't know what my right hand is doing and vice versa. So Netscope One is the central nervous system that enables all of the products that are now working together. And what is happening with our customers is they're buying 2, 3, 4, and they're like putting this jigsaw together so that now they have that full set.
So Netscope still sells their CASB product?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the way to think about CASB is focused on protection, while DSPM is focused on posture. The difference being that in DSPM, you are doing sampling. In CASB, you are looking at all of the data. It's higher lift. If you see enough risk, for example, through DSPM, you may want CASB. Similarly, if there is a CASB customer of Netscope, they automatically get that part of DSPM. Yes.
How does your tool detect and prevent data leaks?
Yeah, so it works with DLP tools. It works with tooling that is outside of the DSPM tool, but exists in the Netscope portfolio.
Does it increase user latency from entering the query to getting?
Great question. We are not inline. The example that I gave was inline, like where I said we have internally tried this, but we are not inline. So what we do is we go and look at the query from the logs. In fact, this engine does not even have to run on the database. It doesn't run on the database. It runs somewhere else. So there is no latency. There's a complete pass through. See, the only place where data moves in like one single query is in Mission Impossible when the knock list is being transferred. Right? Otherwise, what happens is it's stolen in bits and pieces. And this, because it's almost real time, it is able to capture and get that quickly to you.
There are no more questions. Let's-
Man deserves a clap just for doing a demo. Fresh.
Who has no
Like, not
questions?
set up.
Okay, I can take those questions. And now I really need a drink.
Lou, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question? Yeah, unless your
Yes,
question-
sorry, I figured that out. I was having trouble the first time around. So a couple questions. One is really kind of related to more of a future, right? If you think about where things are going with technology and all the announcements recently with in around quantum computing, one of the things I saw that I was kind of interested in your platform was that you can see whether or not the data that is in an organization's environment, if it's encrypted, right, as part of the risk profile. And I'm curious, as you look to the future, is there a way to tell, or even today, be able to tell if it's, encrypted to AES 256 standards or another standard, so that you take that into consideration as far as the profile of the data?
We do some of that already. So if
Okay.
there is, for example, data that is masked, we can actually mark it as masked. Like if you looked at the recording later, you will see that there are a few fields that are masked, and we call that.
Awesome. Then the second question is kind of a use case that's around it's around data usage, right? The idea being that you've got the ability to integrate with identity tools. So if you're able to see John Smith and John Smith accesses sensitive data in a particular way, and over time you're able to normalize and get a baseline of how he accesses that data. If that starts to deviate from the norm, is there like a way to get an alert or understand that, hey, this guy is using data in a way that's outside of the normal range for that particular person, like get an alert on it or something?
Yeah, so we are currently working on something called anomaly detection. There, what we are doing is we are doing some outlier analysis, both at the individual's level and as well as that role level. So are people in this role do they have a baseline, and is this person outside the baseline? And similarly, what does this person generally do, and what is he doing this particular day?
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited to hear that. Thanks for sharing.
Like a follow-up, that mean like suddenly someone started searching payroll data that they wouldn't normally look at
Yeah.
because it's the end of the year and they're looking at the performance review and they want to see how they're doing. If they never looked at it, but suddenly they did, they had access all along,
Yes.
but they never did it.
Yeah. So again, like I said, we're working on this, and there will be exceptions. So for example, I'll give you another slightly different. You're a public company, and there's going to be an analyst call. Finance people should not have access to a certain type of financial data 15 days before an analyst call, for example.
Yeah.
That would be a use case. You can write it in policy.
But can you flag it so you can check if they're looking at
The
18?
purpose of the policy is to flag
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Yes, yes.
before they get to the 15-day. Like,
No.
oh,
Because what I showed you is not in line.
oh.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time.
you.